Hi, everyone. Welcome back, and we are happy to have you join us for yet another edition of the Strata Orchestration Kitchen. Today, we'll be talking about protecting on-prem legacy apps with Microsoft Entra ID, and I'll be your host today. My name is Mark Callahan. I'm on the product marketing team here at Strata, and I'm joined by Chef Terry Kozard, who is on our solutions engineering team. And we'll be walking you through how we are able to add Microsoft Entra ID, formerly known as Azure AD, of course, to any on-prem legacy non-standard app. Terry, as we think about what we're going to discuss today, I do want to sort of start with Azure AD as a cloud IDP is a great platform. There's many reasons people are using it. I mean, of course, everyone's very familiar with O365 and E5 licenses, and so it becomes a very natural cloud IDP for many enterprises to choose. And we've seen it very frequently throughout our customers that they adopt this cloud IDP, but then they find that they struggle with those non-standard applications.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things where we can really add a lot of value, that we think Azure is fantastic. We've got a great partnership with Microsoft, and really we see most of the industry going towards Azure in terms of their desire to have that be the authentication, authorization engine, and multi-factor for all of their applications. Yeah. One of the things that we can add to that, and frankly make Azure better, is we can allow you to do that with your legacy applications, those that don't natively fit nicely in Azure AD or Entra ID capabilities today.
Great. Well, let's take a look at how we're going to go through today's Orchestration Kitchen session. So we'll start with, as we do in every one of these workshops, we do a quick refresh about what identity orchestration, the technology is, and how it actually plays a role in this. We're going to then do a recipe whiteboard where we're going to go through the visuals and actually show you in diagram how the recipe would play out. Of course, it's a good cooking show is never enough to just have the recipes. We're actually going to get into the kitchen, and we're actually going to do a live demo of how simple it is to add Azure AD to a non-standard application. And then throughout, I'll be keeping an eye on questions. So please feel free to add any questions that you might have. Terry and I will address those throughout. So, Chef Kozard, without further ado, let's get started. Let's take a look at identity orchestration.
Absolutely, Mark. Let's go ahead and do it. So at its simplest element, the identity orchestration fabric allows you to abstract out all of the common identity-related functions for your applications, all of them, both modern and legacy. We're primarily focusing on legacy applications because that's the one that people just get stumped on a lot more frequently, especially when you're moving to a modern platform like Entra ID. So here we can introduce the fabric in a way that allows you to modernize the applications themselves without ever touching the applications, or at least modifying the applications. And how we do that is we create this identity fabric that sits between the user and the application they're trying to consume. And by policy, you can declare how you want that user to authenticate before it gets to the application. Then you can defer to Entra for access control, conditional access checks, multi-factor, those kinds of things. But then we can extend and go beyond the capabilities of Azure in a number of ways. We can go ahead and source attributes from other places. In fact, in my demonstration in a little bit, we're actually going to use all the great benefits of Azure, but we're then going to go get additional information about a user from a local LDAP store that's local to the on-premise environment.
Just like any good recipe, it's doctoring it up a little bit. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on your toes there. You're actually going to add some additional ingredients, is what you're saying here, to actually make it even a better recipe.
Why not? Let's zhuzh it up and make it delicious for everybody.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, and one of the beauties of our fabric is that it's simple, it's declarative, it deploys in minutes, not months. And so you can be really effective and really powerful with this kind of a platform very easily, even for those applications that are hard to work with. But other things that we can do even for these types of applications is we can go to a centralized authorization engine. We can do modern things that just aren't typically thought of for these older application types. But the secret sauce and what makes our recipe, we believe, unique and better is that we do the last mile integration to the application. So it doesn't matter if that application has its own login form. It doesn't matter if that application needs to consume headers, which is a consistent pattern that we see in things like SiteMinder and Oracle Access Manager and those older WAM type platforms. We do the native protocol that that application expects, so that the application in many cases doesn't know the world around it ever changed. And so it continues to serve your business in a way that is unencumbered, but you then get all the benefits of going to Entra ID for all of the security services and benefits that it provides.
So you're not kidding when you say we talked about this being a no-code approach, and let's jump into the whiteboard in just a moment here. You're not kidding. You said that the app knows nothing is different. Everything seems the same.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In a lot of different patterns, the application has no earthly idea that the SiteMinders of the world went away. If it has its own login form, it doesn't realize that it's not going back to LDAP anymore itself. It can leverage the fabric for those kinds of patterns. So we've designed a simple, elegant, and agile platform to do this in minutes. So
Great.
let me
Well,
show
show us how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me show you how it all works together. So architecturally speaking, these are kind of the user journey that we're going to build out in our recipe today. This is for an application that expects to consume headers. That's how the application knows it's got an authenticated, authorized user that is working with. So from top to the left to right, the user tries to get access to one of these legacy applications. Could be any different types of patterns, could be Kerberos, could be headers, could be forms, all kinds of different patterns that we see in these types of applications. It could be expecting cookies, those types of things.
Mhm.
So by policy, the orchestrator is going to sit in front of that. The orchestrator is so teeny tiny that you can deploy it on the web host. You can deploy it in front of it wherever you want. We're pretty unopinionated about the best place that you want to put it. But by policy, if we haven't seen you before, we're going to say, great, let's go ahead and send that user to Entra ID for authentication to prove that they are indeed who they say they are. Once Entra redirects back to us and says, hey, yeah, this is a valid user, that's when we start doing our magic. Once we know we've got an authenticated authorized user, we then can go to the LDAP here at the bottom. We're going to go get additional contextual information about the user, and we do that at the sub-second that it's needed. One of the unique things about our fabric is that we don't store data. Everything we do is at runtime, so it's hyper fast, really agile, and really performant. And then depending on the application type, we bundle all that information so that the application can natively ingest that information. That could be in the form of headers, as it will be in the demonstration that I show for you. But in other application types, Kerberos, for example, or forms-based, we can go ahead and pass in whatever the appropriate context is for the user. But the value of it doesn't just end there. Yes, it's wonderful to be able to modernize your authentication and those kinds of things. That's the easiest way to think about it. But as we look into the future and the life cycle of that application, the candid reality of identity and systems that are tied to identity is that there's a new protocol every 2 to 4 years. What happens if you want to take advantage of that in the future? Well, you don't have to worry about it if you have a fabric in place, because the fabric knows how to talk about continuous access evaluation. The fabric understands passkeys. The fabric understands WebAuthn. And so regardless of where you want to go in the future, be that 2 days, 2 months, or 2 years from now, we keep that there so that you can trivially express that throughout all of your applications without yet doing another touch and another change and configuration change in all of your applications.
Absolutely. So it is that modernize once, flexible forever sort of idea is what we're talking about here.
That's precisely it. And that's exactly why we built the fabric the way that we did.
Great. Well, this is we see all the pieces of the recipe here. Can you walk us through the step-by-step of how we're going to build the recipe today?
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and segue right in here. So it's a simple 3-step process. We've designed it in a way that even somebody who's coming with no training at all can generally be effective in a lot of these common patterns within 10 minutes. So the first step is you come to mavericks.strata.io, sign up for a trial. And the first thing that you want to do is add the fabric elements. Now, the fabric elements, as we think about them, these are the deeper integrations. This is how you create a trust relationship between the orchestrator, Mavericks, as well as your IDPs. So you would create a relationship from Entra and the orchestrator on both sides so they know to trust each other. And similarly, you create an integration with the local LDAP store so that we know where it is. We have service account credentials that we can go in and read information and those types of things. So it's all the common patterns that you're familiar with, but without that, we don't have the ingredients. After that, step 2 we add the application. Once we have parts of the identity fabric that we can pick on, we now start talking about, tell me a little bit about the application. How does the application expect to know it's got an authenticated authorized user? Is it expecting a particular cookie? Is it expecting headers? Does it expect form fill? Is it expecting Kerberos? There's a lot of different possibilities here. So this is where you go into the configuration UI, and I'll show you all this in a little bit. And you actually tell us the information about the application that we're protecting. So step 2 complete in seconds to minutes.
And we talked about those extra ingredients that we were going to possibly add in here. So you've got LDAP, referenced here twice. Of course, with these older non-standard applications, oftentimes they're using LDAP for other attributes to really have complex policies. So as they're looking to, our customers are looking to migrate to Azure AD, that's where the policies get kind of complex. And then you've got LDAP yet again. So there's other user attributes. Those are extra ingredients we talked about to sauce up the recipe a bit. We're able to pull all those together at once. Is that what we're talking about?
That's exactly right. Because if you think about it, these legacy applications often need more data or sometimes different data than what's in Azure AD today.
Exactly.
And so what we allow you to do is, rather than creating yet another synchronization job to get that data into Azure AD, leave it where it naturally wants to exist. It doesn't matter if that's in an HR platform, if that's in a relational database, if that's in some web service call that exists out there. That's our job. We can go get that, and we do that just at the moment that it's needed, so that we always have the latest information. You don't have race conditions with sync jobs that take long times and things like that. We get it at the sub-second that it's needed. Now, last step 3 is, we've already determined all of the fabric elements that are important to us. We've already defined what does the application look like and where do I find it. And now you stitch them all together in a user flow. This user journey actually creates that ultimate recipe that we talked about. That's where we say, okay, in order to get to this legacy application, I'm going to use my authentication from Azure. Azure then will do conditional access checks, potentially MFA, whatever you want from the IDP perspective. Secondarily, we're going to create an attribute provider for LDAP. That's where we're going to go get extra information. I'm picking on LDAP. You can pick on where your data naturally wants to exist. For today's recipe, we're not going to include the continuous access evaluation or those kinds of things, but suffice it to say, adding those in at a later point really isn't very difficult. So the whole idea is that even with minimal or no training at all, we can get most users fully effective, have policies deployed, and even an orchestrator deployed within minutes. It's our ethos as a company that if we can't make you powerful within minutes, then we're not doing our job as best as we could. And so that's really kind of how we've decided to bake the platform. And candidly, I think we do a reasonable job at it.
Love it. Well, it's a bold statement. We're talking about being effective in minutes. And so this being a cooking show, we're going to dig in and we're actually going to do a live demo now. So we've seen the recipe. Take us through the process of how someone can be effective in minutes, and we talked about this idea that you don't actually have to have that deep technical expertise to work with the UI, that actually a lot of different roles and individuals can work with this. Show us how this takes place.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to first show you the user experience, how a user would see this. Now, keep in mind, this application previously was protected by something like SiteMinder or Oracle Access Manager or IBM's ISAM. But now we are sitting between the user and the application, and we're saying by policy, the policy that we configured, we're going to ask that user to go to Entra ID for authentication. So let's just go ahead and walk through that. This is a pattern that all of our listeners would be very familiar with. So now my user gets to the application. Nothing visually very impactful here, but the important thing to understand is that we're doing all of those things that the application expected. This application, which used to be protected by SiteMinder, doesn't even know SiteMinder went away. It really is that elegant. So what we do is we're actually doing all of the same types of things that SiteMinder or Oracle Access Manager previously did, but now we're doing far more than that, and we're extending the capabilities to be modern and flexible for your environment. So some of the things that we focus on is we now can do finer grained authorization checks than previously were done by policy there. So each page, when I try to navigate to it, we do a runtime evaluation that says, are they in the right department? Well, oh, by the way, the data about my department wasn't in Azure. I had to go somewhere else to go get it. No problem. We do that out of the box. Same thing with when I go to calendar or anything else like that. We just do it at the subsecond that the data is needed, and then we enforce the appropriate policy. So you can get finer grained permissions within your application, and then you can also do this in a very agile and instant manner. Now, the other things that I'd mentioned to you is that this department, it doesn't exist in Azure AD. We would get the claims back from Azure AD. We got those in the first name and the last name, but then we married those things together, both for personalization and for policy enforcement as you're trying to get to the application by grabbing it where it natively wanted to reside.
Sounds delicious. Now, this is the part that I think is going to be really interesting for our audience. We're on the assumption, and we're looking at the registrations. We know that a lot of the people who are watching this are doers. They're practitioners who are actually likely already into their Azure migration experience, and they've come across these non-standard apps and realized how difficult it is to rewrite them and replicate these policies. That fine-grained authorization that you mentioned there, it sounds interesting. Let's dig into that more.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I segued into here is actually the configuration utility that we provide for our orchestration fabric. So I'm going to walk you through the exact steps that I showed you in the whiteboard, and we're going to show you exactly how I build it for this application. So the first step, give us the elements of the identity fabric. These are, again, the more deeper integrations where your identity providers are, your MFA providers, your attribute providers, all of the places where we have a little richer context about the user. So what I picked on for this is the application that I picked on was called Maverick 7. And as you can see here, the information on our side of things is the standard metadata exchange that you would expect for OIDC-based parameters. On the other side of that, we went to the Entra ID, created an enterprise application, and we traded the information based on where we deployed the host. So really simple. You can do this. You've probably done it dozens, if not hundreds of times in your organization. We just ask you to do that once. Similarly, with the LDAP, we do the same types of information. We're not doing any data exchange this time. Tell us where the LDAP directory exists. Tell us all of the information about our service account and passwords and those types of things. And then we can allow you to go directly at that as well. So the identity fabric is that simple. Add those two.
It's really so simple that even a marketing person could do it. We made that thread at the beginning, and here we are making good on it. So we've got the first of our ingredients as we put things together, and we're starting to create that identity fabric. Applications, let's see what we've got there.
Absolutely. So the application that I'm protecting, we can do modern as well as legacy applications. Today, we're focusing on legacy. We call it Sonar. And here, this is pretty simple too. We just say, tell us where's the application that you want us to protect, obviously, and then where the authorization pages are, things like that. And then if you want to do finer grained authorization checks throughout that for a page, a button, whatever it's important to you, you just define those as a resource here. So your application owner can do this. You can do this on their help, but again, it takes seconds. Then the last thing, how you mix all of these ingredients together, is you create a user flow. This is where you define the user journey and you make all the pieces and parts sing in harmony or cook into a delicious dish. So here we have the ability to say, look, we've got for this Maverick 7 application that I'm using, we're actually front-ending an application called Sonar. We're going to authenticate people using that Azure Entra ID OIDC spec application. We're also going to get some information from LDAP. And now we can do that finer grained authorization policy that I demonstrated, that if you're going to go to the application, of course, you have to be authenticated to Azure. That's just kind of simple elementary logic there. But if you want to go to see the calendar page or the organization page, we go through additional checks beyond just the authentication to make sure that you're properly authorized to get to that page.
Great. And I think this answers the question that we saw from Eric just a moment ago. I was keeping track of these, that he was actually just asking about how do you set those policies for the fine-grained authorization at the resource level? And I think that's exactly what we just showed there.
Yeah, absolutely. So you put whatever easy or complex logic that you may need or want. It's also important to understand that one of the core capabilities of our platform is something we call service extensions, that sometimes you have authorization decisions that are just more robust than are you in this department? Do you have this attribute? Those kinds of things. Sometimes it's a really involved process. That's exactly what service extensions are there for, is you can go to whatever level of complexity that you need or want, calculate it, go fetch it somewhere else, whatever you may need or want.
Got it.
But I'd mentioned this particular application, Sonar, expects the presence of headers. That's how SiteMinder worked before we replaced it. And now this is where you actually define where that is. So the core header that those types of applications need is called SMUser. It's just how SiteMinder works. And then here's where we go get it. We get it from a claim back from Azure. But sometimes that department, as I'd shown you before, doesn't exist in Azure. So we have to go somewhere else where it naturally wanted to exist, the LDAP directory. So here, the name of it will be department, and then I'll go get it from the LDAP department there. So it's intended to be incredibly simple and elegant. And then the last step, once you've got it and you're in a place where you want to test it, just publish it. What'll happen there is that'll publish to a storage area that you as a customer define, and then the orchestrator looks to that repository to automatically update itself. And here's where we go ahead and do that, and you determine where you want it to get pushed, and then just push it. It's automatically done. So quite literally, your first time through, you should be able to do this in, certainly under a half an hour, depending on how long it takes you to set up the Entra ID side of things. So pretty quick and elegant.
This is great. Well, you promised making this happen in minutes, and the good news is you did it in about 7 minutes. So I love seeing that come together right there. Well, that's great. I mean, I think that we've very much talked about this, the story that we were looking to uncover today, which was you've got these non-standard based applications. How do you get them to work with Entra ID? So we have a couple of questions additionally that didn't come up that we didn't answer during the session. And are you cool if we jump into those real fast?
Absolutely.
All right. So the first one I've got here from Matt says, how does this solution compare to the Azure App Proxy?
Oh, really good question. So Azure App Proxy actually is a free tool to most license types, perhaps even all of them, and it allows you to take a header-based application and expose it to your customers through Azure. So conceptually, it's a little similar to what I showed here, but there's some really important distinctions about how it behaves and how we behave. So the Azure App Proxy, while a wonderful technology, routes all of your traffic out to the internet. So if the legacy application that we're talking about is sitting next to you or in the data center and the domain that you are currently working with, in order to use the Azure App Proxy, you have to route all of your traffic out to the internet and then back into that. So heaven forbid you have an internet outage, heaven forbid any of those rainy day scenarios may happen, because you're not going to get access to that application even if it's right next to you. So that's certainly one challenge there. The other challenge is that we see that it's the way that for forms-based application, that they do say that they can support forms-based application, but they do that by creating a password vault, which in a lot of security departments is frowned on, because that's a place to hack and find out your users' true passwords. We don't do any of those kinds of things. So it's very elegant. And then the last thing that is a real big significant differentiator, and candidly why Microsoft is a great partner of ours, is the ability to create service extensions. I talked about it really briefly, but service extensions are the way to do something unique, to craft a cookie, to go get things from a place that just is really hard to get to or just non-standard. So we can go into any level of complexity or any level of flexibility that you may need through service extensions, and those are simply just not possible through the Azure App Proxy. Great question, though. Thank you, Matt.
Perfect. I think that answered that one. And the second one that I have for you is from Ellen, and it asks, can I mix and match Azure services and ones from other vendors, or do I have to pick just one?
Oh, heavens, that's a great question. So that's actually one of the cool things, and thank you for asking it, Alan, is that we're not tied to any given ecosystem. We love Azure. We're fantastic partners with Microsoft, and we're excited that you're excited about them as well. We think you're making the right choice. But sometimes you acquire a company who has a different technology. Sometimes you've made investments in different parts of the business that have different MFAs or different places to store data, or even a different tenant of Azure. That's really easy in an identity fabric. I'd mentioned all of that identity fabric flexibility that you can abstract out all of the core identity services. Well, one of the things you can do uniquely through us is you can have multiples of any of them. So we extend the Azure ecosystem. So if you want to use something in AWS, perhaps you create some permission set or a web service call through AWS Lambda. That's super easy for us. We still send you through all the authentication stuff through Entra ID because that's really wonderful stuff that it has. But if you have investments somewhere that don't fit nicely in that Azure ecosystem, that's a slow Tuesday for us. We can do that really simply. So the simple value proposition that we have is that whatever your business function, wherever your data resides, we're here to support your business, not tell you how to change your business to support our technology.
Love it. Well, I think we're unfortunately just about out of time here, but that was phenomenal. We covered a lot of ground today. In terms of what's next, be sure to check into the Orchestration Kitchen Hub. This, as I mentioned, is our second episode. We'll continue to cook up some really spicy solutions to your really thorny challenges as you're looking at identity issues across your company, as you're looking to new ad services. So be sure to check our schedule for the next episode and dial back in and join us then. And Terry, as we're thinking about ways that if somebody wanted to talk with you and they just had some questions about what they saw today, or they wanted to talk a little bit more about Azure AD and legacy apps, can they reach out to you directly?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's on the screen, terry@strata.io. Be more than happy to field any questions. But also, if you want to go ahead and register for a trial yourself, there's no reason that you need to ask my permission or for that. Just go to mavericks.strata.io and you can self-register, start getting familiar with the UI. The one request that I do have if you go there is don't let any questions go unasked. We have an entire team of people who are there just strictly to make you successful. And our team thinks about this identity ecosystem all day, every day. So we really have a lot of capability to help you and be very effective. So if you have a question, if you wonder what if you had a magic wand or a magic spatula in our case, and thought, wouldn't it be cool if, give us a call, drop us an email, and we'll, generally the answer is yes. And it's just a matter of figuring out the details and what's the best way to make that yes happen.
That sounds great. Well, Terry, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you, our audience, for joining us as well. We can't wait to talk to you. And we do look forward to hosting you at our next Orchestration Kitchen event. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Bon appetit.